Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's just a hair after 9, so first of all, thank you folks for coming. We certainly do appreciate it. Paul and I do these town hall meetings. We do them every year before the session, and then we'll do one after the session to kind of talk about what happened during the session. So today is, we'd like to meet with folks from the community, folks as constituents, and kind of have a little opening comments, and then we'll open it up for questions and try to answer your questions and kind of see what's on you folks' minds and talk about what might transpire in the next session. So last year, if you remember, after the election, we had a all one-party control in the House, the Senate, and in the governor's office. And so we weren't sure what to expect as far as what the process was going to be, as far as what was going to be talked about during the session and what kind of money was going to be spent, things like that. So what happened last year is we went into session, we had a $17.5 billion surplus, and so we were hoping that we would end up with some tax reductions and money spent in some areas that needed some attention, certainly one of them being nursing home and another one being child care. And as it turned out, that $17.5 billion was spent, plus several more billion. They spent about $39.5 billion last year. So our budget in 2011, that biennial budget was, and the reason I remember that is that's the year that we had a $5 billion deficit. And that budget ended up being $34 billion, and that would have been for the 2 years, 11 and 12. At the end of June, we finished this last biennium, and that budget was $51 billion. Of that 51, about 500 million had not been spent until the start of the current session, and they went back and spent more money from the previous budget, and so it was about a $51 billion budget, which means over a period of 5 bienniums, we increased spending in Minnesota from 34 billion to 51, or about $17 billion. This session alone, which will be a 2-year biennium, that was increased from 51, and it'll be somewhere in the low 70 billions when it all gets tallied. So quite frankly, that's not sustainable. We can't keep spending that kind of money. One of the things they did do is they raised taxes and fees by $9.6 billion. Most of it was in fees in all areas. If there's a fee charged on something, in most cases that fee went up. There was also some money left from the federal government from the COVID days. There was some dollars sitting there, and those dollars got spent as one-time money. So those dollars will not recur. Those dollars won't be tracked as tails into the next biennium. So the other day, when the November forecast came out, they forecasted a $2.4 billion surplus for the balance of this biennium, and then going into the next biennium, which would be 25-26, they projected a $2.3 billion deficit. So hopefully we can take the $2.4 billion surplus from this year and roll that into the next biennial budget. If we do that, then that would leave us with a surplus of $81 million, assuming everything would stay static from here on out. We'll find out more. We get the February forecast. We'll find out more what is actually going to be projected to be future dollars and things like that. So that's kind of where it sits right now. One of the things that really affected rural Minnesota was nursing homes. There's been a lot of problems with keeping nursing homes open, and there's a lot of reasons that's happening. Certainly, some of the closures have been because they just can't find workers. Other closures have been because they have workers, but they don't get the dollars from Medicaid enough to pay the workers the salaries they need to keep them. and some other things. So at the end of last session, we were able to negotiate $332 million additional spending for nursing homes, and a good share of that went to rural nursing homes. And there was a lump sum payment made, and then there was another one this fall made, and that was kind of to get the nursing home stabilized from some of the problems they were having, and that did work. However, it isn't getting us out of the woods. We still have issues with payments to nursing homes. So hopefully that's something we'll take a look at again on this session, figuring out some things we can do there. Last year, 2 years ago, when we looked at the nursing home problem, it looked like about $1 billion cost to resolve it. Last year, like I said, we had 332 million we put in the end, and then there was a 300 and some million that had been put in during the cycle with different programs and stuff that the nursing homes get. So we had we had invested somewhere around 600 million, and we needed about another 400 million to really resolve the issue. So that's kind of where that's at. So we'll be taking a look at that, see what we can do there. That's just kind of a general on the budget and the spending of last year, and so I'll turn it over to Paul, and then we'll turn it over for questions.
Well, thank you, Gary. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the forum today. Happy you're here. And I'll just kind of briefly review where we're at in the cycle. Of course, we're in the middle of a 2-year biennium. Last year being the budget year, when the budget is established, Gary described in some detail just how much spending went on, but that's kind of the bulk of the work in the first year of the biennium. We'll be going back into session on February 12th for the second year of this biennium. It's typically a shorter session. Last year we started in early January. This year we won't start till February 12th. And the focus will be generally on a potential bonding bill, a capital investment bill. It's not all bonding, it's also involves some cash probably. Just how that shapes up, we won't know until we go through the deliberations of session. But I think it's fairly likely that there will be a capital investment bill this year. There was a substantial one last year, which is a little bit unusual, but if you look back to the year before, the bonding bill did not pass. So last year's bill was really kind of a hangover from the year before. So it's likely we'll do another fairly substantial bill this year. The majority has set aside some cash, I believe somewhere around 600 million that they have earmarked for capital investment, and then there may well be borrowing attached to that. So that's where we're kind of at in the cycle. We will meet from February 12th, probably right up to our deadline of May, third week in May, I don't know the exact date offhand, to finish this year's work. There's I'm hopeful anyway, that there's some repair work done on some of the bills that passed last year that are revealing their shortcomings or that were not thoroughly thought through or designed properly. We'll see how much repair work they're willing to do. And just a reminder that Gary and I are both in the minority right now. The Democrats control both the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, and that's not going to change this year. The election of 24, of course, the Senate is not on the ballot in 24. The governor is not on the ballot in 24, but I and all of my colleagues in the House will be on the ballot. And so that is the next opportunity for voters to express their opinion of who should be controlling the state of Minnesota, and should we get a conservative majority in 24, at least there'll be, if you look historically, Minnesota seems to like divided government, and right now it's not divided, and we've seen the results of that situation. There's a number of issues that we could talk about, and I think we'll turn it over to you folks to find out what it is you're interested in hearing about. Gary touched on the nursing home issue. That's an ongoing issue, and it affects not only nursing homes, it also affects our hospital system. As many of you know, our hospitals have been unable to place patients that are ready to be discharged but need extended care, rehabilitation care that normally is done in the nursing home, but because our nursing homes are so short of staff, they can't keep all their beds open. So hospitals are having a real challenge finding places to locate those patients, and that causes a backup in our hospital system, which is not good for our hospitals. And hopefully we can make more progress on that. We worked hard, as Gary mentioned, to get some work done in that area, but it took right up till the last day of session to accomplish anything, which was very disappointing for me. I had set up a group within our caucus to work on the issue, hoping that we could get some work done early and make some decisions early. That did not happen. It took right up till the end of session to get some money into our nursing home situation. And that's just one area where we have challenges, but let's open it up to you folks and see what you'd like to talk about.
Yes.
I have a question. I'd like to thank you for doing the paid lunch for everybody, for schools, free lunch for everybody at school. But I understand, and I'm not sure I have all the details on this, that many other grants are contingent on the number of free and reduced lunches. And because as a parent, your child is already getting free lunch, why do I need to fill out the form so they don't fill it out? And so then that prevents the school district from getting some, for one thing, compensatory aid, because they don't have the number of free and reduced lunches. Is there any way to get that information other than have the parents fill it out and put their income on there, or to take general information that's available publicly, like, how much, what the poverty rate is in a certain area, or, because I know it helped, I think it hurts some of our rural schools.
So let's go back and take a look at the process with this free and reduced lunches. Remember, not too many years ago, this deal with lunch shaming came about?
Right.
Yeah.
And so the resolution to that was that you could not shame somebody because they didn't pay for their lunch.
Right.
At the end of the day, there were very few people that were not getting lunches in the public school. Okay? People that didn't fill out the form, their children still got a lunch. So, in my opinion, this free lunch program, it got people really excited because it was a good sell, it sounds good. But the purpose of that was to change and get rid of, in my opinion, get rid of the formula that you were talking about. The free reduced lunch formula was used for several other things
Yeah.
throughout the system.
Right.
That was going to have an impact of about $44 million on rural Minnesota schools when that formula changed.
That hurt.
It was going to reduce.
Okay.
They agreed to put $4 million back in. So that means about $40 million, unless, well, it depends on how it all plays out. But that means there was a loss of about $40 million to rural schools. That didn't just happen, trust me. I don't buy for a minute that just happened. That was one way to move dollars from A to B and do it through a program. That formula will no longer be used because there's no longer a program.
Well, I think
Because
they
free-
fill out the forms, can't they? But
They won't be using that form because they won't be using that formula is, as I understand the way it was presented, that formula is not going to be used anymore.
Well, how do the schools get more money?
yeah, so how, but the money that they use,
There will be other ways of deciding what those categorical payments are.
okay.
There will be categorical payments,
And do you think they're
absolutely.
good? Do you think those new formulas are good, or are they gonna?
We
hurt?
haven't seen the new formula yet. I think it's gonna hurt rural Minnesota, yes. Yes, I do. Yeah, and that's my concern about this free and reduced lunch program is I don't think that was the purpose of the program. The purpose, in my opinion, of the program was to change that formula. And that was one way of doing it. Because there's not many students that are not getting a free lunch.
And the
I
money
just-
that they get doesn't necessarily go to the lunch program, they can use it for other things in the schools.
Well, see, what they
So
did,
the categorical aids can go to other things. True.
well, yeah, the categorical stuff isn't about the free lunch.
Right, it's just,
All they used from the free lunch was the formula,
right,
because it gives a lot of information,
right,
and that information was used in the formula for other, we call them categorical spending, for other categorical spending.
right.
But if you don't have free and reduced lunch anymore, you're not gonna have that formula, and that formula is gonna change. And I haven't seen the formula yet, and I'm sure that that'll be introduced probably very soon. And the Department of Education will work on that. And that's where I'm concerned about what it's gonna actually do to our rural schools. Because the numbers we were seeing were about a $44 million, and they were gonna backfill that with about $4 million, which means that's an issue for rural schools.
I would just add, you started out by thanking me for this program. I didn't vote for it. I don't support it. I don't think we need to have free lunch for every student in school. There are many students whose families can afford to pay for lunch. And many of our other programs, we target to those that are in need, not just a general free for everybody. I think this is an example of a COVID hangover. Many programs were established during COVID that supported various things within our society with extra spending, but we're having a real hard time bringing those back to what I would call a normal level. It's just, I don't think necessary, and it's another example of unintended consequences, and you've revealed that in your question, that since we've done this free lunch thing, we're not able to utilize the free and reduced program that we had in the past, and that affects not only state spending, it also affects federal money for our schools. It just wasn't, the wheels weren't all turning, it feels like, to understand exactly the ramifications of this. We should be spending our money wisely, helping the people that need help, and giving free lunch to people that can afford to buy a lunch, to me, is not a wise use of our resources. But I realize there's people that feel differently.
I would say that, as in opposition to that you don't know for sure what goes on in a family. And maybe it looks like they can afford it, or maybe their income is, but their expenses are different. So I would support continuing the free and
And that's
reduced
certainly your
lunch for
privilege.
everybody, but
I'd also say that I've heard anecdotally, I don't think anybody's studied it yet, but there's a lot more wasted food now as a result of people
and that study would be really important.
kids that go through the lunch line, they take the full meal because they're required to, they pick off the things that they might want, and the rest gets dumped in the garbage. That's not a good use of resources
Well,
either.
it's a federal program that you have to put it all on their plate, they can't say no thank you.
That's right.
So
That's
it-
right.
it-
That's,
it-
well,
it's not an
so
easy fix.
unintended
Yeah,
consequences.
you're right.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Teresa?
Thanks for being here, and I just wanted to get clear, so the total funding from both the direct appropriation for nursing homes is about 600 million, the need is $1 billion.
When we took a look at it 2 years ago, it was gonna be about $1 billion to help these rural nursing homes get funded so that they could compete with the outside labor markets and pay the wages needed to be paid, pay their expenses, and keep the beds open. And so we've ended up funding 600+ million of that, so there's still a shortage of in excess of 300, it's north of 300 and some million.
And then the other issue, if I understand it correctly, is the timeliness or lack of timeliness on the reimbursement. And
Yes.
that disproportionately affects greater Minnesota, if I understand it correctly. Is there a way, policy-wise, to just fix the timeliness of reimbursement issue? Because that would help
Well,
It wouldn't fill that gap, but it would solve some problems, but I don't understand where that policy block is. Is
It-
it a state or a federal?
that would be probably state, because most of that is Medicaid. Medicaid is managed by the state, Medicare by the federal, but Medicare wouldn't get involved, so it's a Medicaid issue. So what happens is, okay, so let's say that you're delaying the payment 60 days. And I'm just grabbing a number that, don't put that number anywhere in a formula, because I'm just saying, if you were delaying them by 60 days, and let's say we decided to pay them within like 10, a short, you know, you send in the bill, you get paid. So you would have, yeah, okay, so 30 days. So you'd have one shot to where you would get your payment increased by, in that 30-day period. You'd move it so it was paid sooner. But then after that, now instead of being 60, you'd be 30. So the fact that the payments are held back is an issue, but it's really not that big a piece of the solution. Because if you're getting paid 12 months later, that's a continuous thing. If you back that up to where you're only getting paid 30 days late, you're gonna have an influx of money for one payment. And then now you're set at the 30-day.
But it would solve.
It-
I constantly hear that delay issue as a problem.
Yes,
It would
that's-
solve a cash
yes.
flow thing.
Yep.
Because I don't see how businesses can operate paying and not getting reimbursed for, even if it's cyclical, like every month it's the same
Yep.
amount or whatever. But it would seem to me that, yes, I understand it doesn't solve that 300, 400 million gap, but it would solve.
It would
like
help.
this problem.
It would certainly help.
And that's a state, you're saying that's a state issue, the state could fix that?
I believe so. I think,
Because I feel like that's something
Yeah,
that
it's,
should be a legislative.
I agree with
priority.
both of you, really, it's not gonna fix the overall problem, but timeliness of payments will help in the short term, and we have a program in Minnesota where nursing homes are reimbursed for their actual costs, but it takes, there's an application process, and it takes about 2 years for that to be fully funded. So
Yeah.
we could do some work there, and we should,
Yeah.
whether we will be able to or not, I don't know. Our work on nursing homes has been stonewalled by the DFL, frankly.
And they only have so much, nursing homes only have so many resources to lobby too, that's the
Right.
other thing.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yes,
Well, and I had heard, and I'm not sure if it's totally correct, Tracy, you probably know more, that when they, it is delayed like the 2 years, they're getting paid at that 2-year level, so if inflation goes up, they're not getting enough as it is anyway.
Well, they're constantly trying to catch up, and
Yeah,
the two-year
it's a
delay
constant
makes
cycle
it,
that is never
makes it
gonna
hard.
end unless,
you know.
I mean, my creditors don't wait for a year.
No.
So,
And if they do, they add interest.
oh, absolutely. Which I don't think our nursing homes are allowed to do.
Well, they probably pay it and, but they're using
Reason-
dollars from 2 years before that.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, I don't think they're sitting on 2-year-old bills. I hope
No.
not.
No, they can't,
No.
but they're dipping into their reserves to keep the cash
Yeah.
flow going, and once you're used up your reserves, then what do you do? So that's part of the crisis, that and the shortage of labor is really a
Big issue.
serious problem, but you don't get more workers if you can't pay a competitive wage, so.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, appreciate you being here. I guess my question is after what happened last year, I mean, everything the DFL presented, no matter how crazy it was ran through. And I was here at last year's town hall, and you guys weren't expecting it. I don't think like the marijuana, you thought that would take a couple more years so they could get it in place. But anyway, are you hearing anything from the other side of the aisle? What to anticipate this year, or are you just gonna get bombarded with another barrage of these, crazy, when I looked at just crazy stuff coming through with no warning, and you guys, and I feel bad because you have no way to stop it, because you're not in control. I mean, are we looking for another year of craziness, and we just gotta hang on and just pray the state survives without being destroyed?
I can't
I mean,
answer
that's
you,
the way I-
well,
I mean,
I
that's
can't
the way-
answer your question because we
Okay.
don't know,
Yeah, I
of
mean,
course, what's gonna
that's what I'm
happen.
seeing.
We're hearing some rumblings of what they may have in their agenda, but we're also hearing rumblings, for instance, I've heard that the leadership in the House wants to come in and do a bonding bill and nothing else, the DFL leadership.
Okay,
But that's the leadership, that's not the caucus.
Yeah.
So they have a large caucus with a large variety of opinions. And as you stated, a lot went through last year, kind of unchecked. And we're seeing the ramifications of that. There's repair work that needs to be done. There's things that are being challenged constitutionally. We've already seen one of those decided. There was a drug program that passed the legislature and was signed by the governor that's already been declared to be unconstitutional. There's election matters that are being challenged in court because we believe they're unconstitutional. There's many programs where the details weren't really worked out. For instance, if you mentioned marijuana,
yeah.
there's a whole bunch of things
Yeah,
that,
that was unbelievable,
it's
what
just-
that would go through
it's-
without having some kind of enforcement.
and there's no
Structure in
leadership. There's two departments, there's medical marijuana and there's a recreational marijuana. Both of the leadership positions in those two programs are vacant. The first one, we saw a couple months ago, they appointed a new administrator for the recreational marijuana who turned out to have a background that was inappropriate, so that I think she served 1 day, or maybe she didn't serve at all, and resigned. And they haven't filled that position since. They apparently can't find someone. The medical marijuana director administrator just resigned recently to take a different job. So we've got this huge undefined program for marijuana that is lacking leadership and lacking the clear definitions of who can do what. And at the same time, we've got products coming into Minnesota that are very potent. Some of this new marijuana stuff, the THC levels are very high, and we don't have the structure in place to properly test these things and keep some of this stuff off of our shelves. It doesn't belong there. At the same time, people like Gary can start growing it in their basement. I'm sorry, anybody can grow marijuana.
You were the farmer.
I'm a
Thank you.
farmer, but
Are you teaching Gary how?
But, we laugh, but it's not really funny, because these products are potent. They will have an effect on our society. They will affect the safety of our highways. They will affect our healthcare needs, because we will see some people have uncontrolled desires. And there's work that needs to be done I've said for a while that legalized marijuana is probably coming to Minnesota. As you look across the country, there's many states that have legalized marijuana. So sooner or later, we were probably gonna have it too. I've been voting against it all the way, but that's just my opinion. But if you're gonna do something, do it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that part of the concern I have is there's a couple bills that really need to come back and get some work done. One of them is paid family leave, and another one is the marijuana. Unfortunately, when you put together bills that either haven't had much thought or are loosely put together, they'll go to the department, and then pretty soon, the department is making those decisions of what they think the intent of the legislation is. And then they use rulemaking to make that bill that way. And so I would like to see both of those come back and get some things fixed in them. Because if that doesn't happen, chances are the agencies will use rulemaking and they'll fix it to the intent they want it to be. One thing that has been floating around, and it's been floating around for the last couple of years, I think we probably saw it four or 5 years ago when it started, is assisted suicide. And I have a feeling that one might be on the front burner this year, is assisted suicide. Just hearing some rumblings, but nothing official yet. But we've had bills in the past on it, and it seems like there's a little more support coming for it, so we'll see where that goes. But that's one that I do have real concerns about and do not support, and have a concern that might be something that moves through this year. We'll see.
Thank you for your position on that.
Yes,
I just wanna thank you for 14 being done. I don't think anybody hates it.
We would like to take full credit for that, but that wouldn't be appropriate. It was a combination, of many decades' effort from
Yeah.
this community and other communities.
And
What's
Bob
that?
Boisman.
Bob Boisman, but Joel Albrecht was very active in the effort too, and I know others. I know when I first declared that I was going to run for office, I got calls on 14 before anybody even knew my name. I think.
Well, we love it.
Because it's a big deal.
yes.
But it's also taken a very long time to accomplish.
Yes.
Now, it was a combined effort of we worked on it, but lots of other people worked on it too. And that's the way things get done, right? It's no one person can get things done. It takes a group effort to make it happen, and I thank the people that supported it all the way through. It's taken so long that the other end of 14 in the Rochester area is already wearing out, and in some cases it's outdated. To make it safe, they're looking at rebuilding interchanges and reworking some areas back there. So transportation is so important, both transit and our roads and bridges. We will see there's some substantial federal monies available, and we will do everything we can to make sure that rural Minnesota gets its share of that. I don't know if you heard recently, but the Blatnick Bridge in Duluth is going to be rebuilt to the tune of, I think it's about 1.7 billion or something like that, 1.8 billion. So when one bridge takes that much money, we've got a real challenge. And that's not just our transportation infrastructure, it's infrastructure in general is wearing out. Much of it was built, our water treatment and freshwater systems were built, many of them 100 years ago or more, and they're out of sight and out of mind, but they are wearing out. And to me, that's one of the things that government needs to do, is make sure that we have safe water to drink and we are properly treating our waste as it leaves our cities and our homes. So hopefully we kind of refocus on those very important areas.
There were there's a lot of negatives happened last year, in my opinion, but there were some good things too. One of the things that years ago, well, I don't know how many years ago it was, I shouldn't say years ago, but a while ago we had put some money in for communities under 5,000 for roads and bridges and for townships. That wasn't dedicated funding, so it ended up going by the wayside. This year that was brought back in, and so there will be some additional funding for townships and additional funding for small communities that did not get road and bridge money. That'll be brought back in. So that's certainly a positive from that standpoint for rural Minnesota. And so it's going to be an interesting session. Don't know for sure what all is going to come about. We're not hearing much yet. With us not going back in until the 12th of February, there won't be much discussion on either caucus, either the Republican or the Democrats, I don't think, about as to what their agenda really is going to be. I know once we get through the first of the year, we'll be starting on the Republican caucus, putting together, the areas that we want to work on and things like that. Some of them are pretty standard, others will be trying to correct some of the stuff. But so at that point in time, I think we'll start hearing and seeing some of the things that they want to move forward. I know last year they had a list of, I think it was 30 things that they wanted to accomplish. And when you saw that list, you kind of thought, well, this isn't going to happen, that's not going to happen. At the end of the day, every one of them had a check mark by it. So they moved a lot of stuff last year that I didn't think we would see for 3-4 years, but that's the way it works. So other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, not so much something you can solve right now, but 2 observations. I went down to Flandre Park 2 weeks ago with some friends, and I think there's only one person working at Flandre. If I understood her right, she's the main officer there, I can't remember her name. Well, that's terrible. State parks are a big deal and can be underfunded, so I'm just asking you to keep state parks on your radar. You talk about maintenance and things like that as well, but it's also personnel to make it happen. And one that really gets my goat, and I don't have any hard evidence to share with anybody, is I've heard some really disturbing things about the Minnesota Historic Society. With plans to get rid of references to the U.S. Dakota War, the markers, including the granite markers. And I don't know how to battle that, but that would, to tear down history, because one side seems to have more ear with MHS. I don't know.
This has been a real problem, and it's,
You've got several in your backyard here.
yes.
Apparently.
And this has been going on for some time, and it's not slowing down. It's getting more aggressive, and they're changing, rewriting history more and more every day. And it's a battle that we're having, and it's something that any support from the grassroots is certainly appreciated, because you get in the vacuum of the chambers, and things happen pretty quick. And we saw that last year. Some pretty major changes were made, and it was just kind of, well, give you an example, when the Upper Sioux, when the Upper Sioux State Park there, that's in my district. I got a call from another senator on a Sunday afternoon saying, "What do you know about this?" The local radio station had just called him and wanted to know what was going on. He called me and I knew nothing about it. That's on a Sunday night. They were having a hearing that following Tuesday, and that decision had already been made. DNR didn't know about it. The Historical Society didn't know about it. That decision was made, and that decision came through on some of the final bills. It was already embedded in there, and that was a done deal. And it just surprised me that the author that carried the bill wouldn't have come and said something to me about this is what she was doing. It was an author out of the cities, and that's the kind of stuff that gets quite irritating, because when you don't even know what's happening in your own district until it's over with. That's really unfortunate, but that's what happened this year, and we saw more and more of that than we normally do.
I've heard a quote from a highly placed person in MHS that the Harkin store and Fort Ridgely are likely never to reopen, to be restaffed. You know, the commissary building at Fort Ridgely is wonderful history in there. They did a movie that was great that they would show the visitors. The diorama, there's so many artifacts in there, and our own Harkin store just up the road has been closed for how many years, and the quote, well, I don't wanna use his name, but is that they're likely never to open. And I don't know if it's a money issue or if that's an influence issue that
Don't know.
it's not
It's
liked.
both, I think.
Please be
there's-
alert to those.
Oh, yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'll just give you one more example. You know, there's a process going on right now to redesign the state flag. Not a process I necessarily support, but there's the date 1858, when the state of Minnesota was established, is an important date for the state of Minnesota, it seems to me. But there are those that find that date distasteful. And so the current process is considering eliminating that date from both the flag and the seal. I don't think that's appropriate. I mean, we are the state of Minnesota. We were established in 1858. That's, to me, an important date. I mean, I realize there are those that find it, you know, that it reminds them of things in the past, but those things are real things that happened. I think of it as revisionist history myself, and I just don't. I think we need to embrace all of history, right? You don't just pick out certain perspectives and only look at it through that lens. You look at it in a more broad perspective. So we'll see, but I agree with what you've brought up, the concerns you've brought up.
Other comments or questions?
I was gonna ask what agricultural bills you would be advancing or what you're hearing in the area of agriculture and sustainable agriculture?
Well, there was quite a bit of work done. I don't sit on ag anymore, so I don't know all the details. The ag budget as part of the state budget is is like less than 1%, I think now. We don't spend a lot of money on agriculture, even though it's the fourth largest industry in the state, and critical to areas like mine and myself, of course. I do know that there's some controversial issues around nitrates that have been surfaced, especially in southeastern Minnesota. The EPA, Federal Environmental Protection Agency, has come in and is putting pressure on our state agencies to do more in that area. The truth is, in my opinion, the state of Minnesota is a leader in dealing with these issues. We do more, as far as I know, more than any other state already. Not that we shouldn't continue to make those efforts, we should. But issues like that are very complex, and they're long range. You don't just turn off a switch and say, oh, we've taken care of this problem, because these things are embedded in the environment, and they're really untraceable as to exactly where the source is. And I won't go into that too much more deeply, but so I expect that we'll see some efforts along those lines. We do support a lot of research in Minnesota through the ag budget, including research on cover crops and other environmentally friendly approaches to agriculture, and I support those things. I think we should do that work and do those studies. On the other hand, I believe agriculture adapts to things quickly and has made a lot of progress that we don't get much credit for over the last decades, as we've changed dramatically the way we farm the land, and we do a much better job than we did 20, 30, in my case, so I started 40 years ago.
I do serve on the Ag Committee, and some of the things that we worked on last year, one was kind of a specific, it was the grain indemnity program, and there's been a lot of issues or a lot of concern about that, and so that was put into bill form last year. It was passed. It does need some more work. I think that'll be worked on this session in the Ag Committee. But a lot of what we looked at last year was programs to help young farmers get into farming. We did some changing on some of the programs that were out there that would help young farmers get in. But if it was a relative or a parent-child, a lot of those weren't eligible for those programs. There was some changes made there. There was additional dollars put into the grant programs for young farmers to borrow money through this grant program not a grant program, a loan program through the government at low interest rates. And that was expanded, not only in what you could use it for, but the dollars you could use it for. There was also programs put together for garden farmers, and that was worked on some time ago through LCCMR, and now it's come back under the Ag Committee. And there was a sizable amount of dollars put in for that. And that would be more in the suburban area that would be used. But I think next year we'll probably see more work with trying to figure out ways to get young farmers being able to take over parents' operations or other people's operations in the land, renting land to young farmers. There was some expansion on that. There was some hiccups in that bill if it was a son or daughter, and some of that was clarified. So it seems like last year the focus was on getting more people involved in agriculture. We take a look at the age of the average farmer. There's some dark clouds out there that at some point, we're not going to have enough young people to take these farms over. Or if we have the people, they're not going to have the funds to do it. So if we could, work on that aspect of it, so I think that's where a lot of the influence will be.
I think Gary just called me a dark cloud, but I'm not sure.
I think you did.
I was thinking more like a hailstorm or a tornado, but that's okay.
I am working on a transition in my own farm operation. I have two young guys that are, I don't have, my two daughters are not interested in farming,
Am
but
I
I'm trying
included in that?
doing the best to help out the young guys that,
Oh, I see.
that they
I've always wanted to
are
farm.
interested in working their way in, and we got a plan. So
What does a young farmer wanna run a 350-acre farm? What are the costs do they look at? $2 million to get into the ballgame or what?
It's very capital intensive. That's why
Yeah.
in most cases, it's either going to a son, so they set up a transition within the family, or it goes on the open market and somebody with capital buys it. So we're seeing our farms get bigger. That's just,
Do we see the day in our lifetimes when ConAgra, Archer Daniels, Midland are running the farms?
no, I don't think so.
No.
Haven't figured out a way to raise cattle and hogs, like without having the farmer on the land do it.
Yeah.
Well, what we are seeing is the way we farm is different. When I first started, it was you're kind of independent. You gather information yourself and apply it to your farm. But now we see it's more of a team approach. I have a crop consultant, for instance, that helps me determine how I'm gonna farm my land, because he's an expert and he covers a big territory, and so I get a lot better information from him than I could glean myself. Livestock industry has changed dramatically. I have a hog barn, but I don't own a hog. Because the integrator owns the hogs, he takes all the market risk, he makes the decisions on how those hogs are fed and treated, and I supply the labor and the building, and so it's, in my father's time, that was the complete opposite. He had his own sows and a small operation where they, raised some pigs, but it was nothing like the way we raise hogs today. There's pluses and minuses to that, of course, and we could go on for a long time talking about agriculture. Let's move along anyway.
But that has been one thing, as Paul is talking about these hog barns. I know different friends of mine where their son or daughters got into farming by building a hog barn and used that as leverage for other capital. And so that's worked, there's some real advantages to some of that stuff too. Today, it's hard for a young farmer to go out and buy land because of the value of the land right now, but if they could find land to rent and then qualify for one of those rental programs to where the guy that owns the land gets a tax credit, if he reduces the rental charge to the young farmer, he gets a tax credit. That's working out pretty well. That was one of the programs we expanded last year. It was there, but we expanded it. So there are some pretty good things happening. However, it's still so capital intensive, it is an issue. Yeah. Other questions or comments? One last chance.
Taxes on social security benefits.
Well,
Is that something you guys are gonna approach, or?
Oh, yes.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
that promise was made and broken, frankly.
Yes, it was.
That they would not be, that they were gonna relieve the tax on social security benefits, as many other states have done. It's one of those ingredients that kind of makes Minnesota an island and tends to drive people out of our state. I think it's an opportunity missed. We had the resources that we could have done that. And I speak selfishly because I receive social security benefits myself, but I think for the good of the state, for the good of our senior population, and to keep seniors as full-time residents of Minnesota, I think it's the right thing to do,
Chance don't see it happening this year.
No, that won't change this year.
Okay.
I don't.
No, I don't think it will. During the election in 2022, I don't think there was a politician out there that didn't commit to or say that he or she wanted to do away with income tax on Social Security. But when they received the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, then the motto was, we don't want to do it where it'll help the rich. So they did pass a bill last year, and that bill, if you're a married couple, I think you can earn up to nearly 100,000 once this goes into effect, and you won't pay Social Security tax on the Social Security. And then that blends off, so it gradually decreases down to, I think it's 140,000, to where you'll pay no tax. So to get it to the next level would be to remove it all the way, so there'd be nobody be paying any income tax. And that goes against the grain of what the DFL want to do. They do not want to help. They feel at that point, if you make over 100,000 as a married couple, that you're wealthy. And so therefore, they're not willing to reduce that tax anymore. So that's where it's going to be tough to get that done, is they designed it to try to eliminate that tier. And it affects, I think this year, the piece they done will probably affect 140-some thousand taxpayers. And the final step would be probably another 163,000 taxpayers. So we're gonna keep pushing it, but it's gonna be a pretty heavy load because of that reason. Yep.
If you think back to the last campaign, there was also a lot of promises made about giving back the surplus that quickly diminished to a very small amount, targeted to only a few people. The checks came from Montana, you might remember. So a lot of those checks were thrown away, and now they're gonna the expiration date is passed, so they're no longer, even if somebody found one, they couldn't cash it, so they're gonna reissue those checks. They're gonna have a second round of checks coming out. I don't know if they're coming from Montana again or not, but just think of the expense of trying to get that money out there. When you have to issue checks twice, you have to hire a company from out of state to do it. And by the way, they were so slow about getting the program in place that they missed the opportunity for those checks to be non-taxable federal income. They're going to be taxed on your federal return. And it's all because they didn't move quickly enough to get the job done. I don't know. It's frustrating. It's frustrating.
Any other questions? Well, if not, thank you folks for coming. We certainly do appreciate it. Paul and I like to hold these town hall meetings. We do it before session and then again after session. And the reason we do it is because we feel I feel the best information we can get is from the people, the constituents that are on the streets every day doing things and know what's going on in their communities and knowing what's going on in their life and how what we do affects you folks. So that's why we like to do these, to get information from what your thoughts are in the process and this and that and the next thing. And so I think it's going to be a very interesting session. It is typically, as Paul alluded to, a bonding session, but typically this is also a policy session. So it's very likely that what they'll do is some policy that will enhance the spending or work with the spending they chose to do last year. We'll see how that plays out, but and we look forward to being back. We'll be back here probably the end of May or the first week of June and talk about what transpired in the upcoming session. So again, thank you for being here, and I'll turn it over for Paul for some closing comments.
Well, thank you, Gary. An issue that didn't come up today was voting. There were a number of changes made to voting law in this last session, some that I supported, some that I didn't support. But my message to all of you and to everyone is vote. There's been some, these last few years, there's been some suspicions raised about our voting system. I don't think they're appropriate. I think our system works, works pretty well. It's not perfect, nothing is perfect. But my message is everyone should vote who's eligible, and you should encourage those you know to vote. When you stay home, sit on your hands and don't vote, you're not doing your civic duty. And I strongly support active participation. Minnesota does a pretty good job of voter participation, but there's always room for improvement. And there's vast opportunities now with the changes in law to vote absentee or early voting. So take part. It's really important, and encourage everyone you know to take part. So thank you all for being here. I had a request before the meeting started to continue the weather we've been having right through the holidays. I don't think I have any way of controlling that, but I do support. I do support that effort. I hope you all have a very happy and blessed holiday, and thank you again for coming out today.
Thank you.
Thank you.